Alright, so we're going to talk real briefly here about contour. This week's emphasis has been in contour shapes, and I want to show how they fit together, and how they're put in relationship to the gesture that we've already built. So if we look at this, first of all, I want to notice a couple things about this profile. One is that it is not straight up and down. Okay, a lot of times when I see artists starting out in life drawing, they handle the profile like this, and it winds up just not looking like much of anything. And they try to build the human body this way, and what happens is it gets very, very stiff, right? That's not how we do the human body, okay? So don't do that. What we have to keep in mind is that the spine has an S-curve, okay? And it has a really nice, elegant curve. If you look at where the shoulders start out top all the way down to the tailbone, down here, there's this really elegant curve to it. And so when we create the gesture, that has to be a part of it. Alright, so everything builds off the gesture. And now when we get to the contour, we want to make sure that when we get to the contour, we keep that same rhythm and balance in the shapes. And what I mean by that is we can create some opposing shapes here. One of the things that's really fascinating about creating rhythm is you get a really strong shape when you oppose a strong form when you oppose these angles. Okay, so we've got straights and curves that we're going to be using as examples here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build. Just give me 1 second to kind of get rid of some of this stuff here. I'm going to build a profile with contour shapes, and it's going to be very fluid. It's going to hopefully have a lot of rhythm to it. Alright, so get back into full screen mode here. Now I'm drawing on top of this. This would be like if you were doing if you're doing your drawings on real paper, this would be the same idea as drawing in your gesture very, very lightly and then coming back over it with a darker stroke. I wouldn't recommend switching between media for this. It may seem logical that you would do maybe the gesture in graphite, which is a little bit lighter, and then go in and do your contours with charcoal. But most of the time that's going to kind of take you out of the rhythm. It's going to be too much production and not enough flow. And so it's better to just get to develop a better sense of that light touch with the media that you're working with. Okay, so you start out with graphite and you start out very, very light, and then you use the same tool, but you bear down a little bit more. It's the same thing with charcoal. Charcoal is a little bit more, there's still a lot of range to it, and so you can, if you use the side, you can stay a little bit lighter for the gesture. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create, now another thing to notice, forgot to mention this before, is the spine is really close to the back, right? So if you can feel your back, you feel your spine most of the time, right? Because it sticks really, really close to the surface of the skin, okay? And that's something to keep in mind as well. There's more mass towards the front of your spine, okay? So everything kind of hangs off the front, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this sort of sense of rhythm here by opposing curves and straights to one another, okay? Now keep this in mind. This is kind of like the animator in me coming out, because these are stylized, but we have to look for, sometimes when you see something in exaggeration, like a stylization of something, you can start to see it more in reality. Okay, so what I've got here, I'm just going to leave the foot down there towards the bottom. Keep getting my touch screen. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to notice here is this is a pretty relaxed profile. But what I want you to notice is that this is very relatively straight, and this is relatively curved. Okay? This is relatively curved, and this is relatively straight. This is relatively curved, and this is relatively straight. So not only do we have this sort of rhythm of straight, curve, straight, but we're also opposing them from side to side. Okay? So we get this sort of rhythm and balance that happens between these contour lines. Okay, and what that does is that translates out into a couple of different places that I want to talk about as well. Okay, so this concept comes all the way through, and you may say, well, I don't have a portrait that or a profile that I'm working with. Well, that's not necessarily needed. Okay, we don't need a portrait or a profile to work with. What I'm going to do is just get rid of this stuff here because this is the wrong way to do it. I don't want you to see that anymore. Alright, and I'm going to do a little bit of a different angle on something. And we're going to talk specifically about legs later on. We're going to go through each kind of individual group. Okay, but if this is the front view of a leg, we can do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of get some gesture here and put some volume into this as well, so we kind of see the ankle and where that's forming. Okay, and the knee, and switch over here to this layer, which is a little bit darker, has 100% opacity. And so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to create this same sort of thing. Now it's going to be a little bit more subtle here because the calf muscles are long and skinny on the outside. They're still curved, right? And then on the inside they kind of ball up, okay? So you've got two different kinds. Now this is a little bit more subtle, right? Because I said straights and curves to start out with, and that's not exactly what's happening here. We have long curve, short curve at this point, okay? And so it's a little bit more of a transition. If I did this one on this side completely straight, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. But I can still convey that sense of balance of my lines. Rhythm with my lines is probably the more accurate term. Okay, the rhythm of my lines are going to be more in shape when I keep that long curve. I'm going to do the same thing on the thigh up here. Right, long curve, and then because of the nature of how the muscles bundle up under here, I get a short, wavier curve. Okay, and that all comes together like so. If my touch screen will let me. Okay, so not only in the profile do we have something that's very, very pronounced curve, straight, like that, but also we can do like a long curve, and then rhythmically balance that out with a shorter curve. Okay, so this is exactly what I want you guys to be looking for opportunities for. This goes all the way down to the granular level, and I just used a euphemism in a business term that I don't like actually, but it goes down. This is the macro scale, right? This is the whole body, but it also goes down to if I were to draw a finger, okay, an individual finger. Let's just get a little bit of a starting point, end point. Now this is going to be a pointer finger. It's going to be pointing in this direction, okay? And it may be tempting to kind of do, well, we got these segments and we kind of do this, and you create this finger and all of a sudden it doesn't have any form to it. What this does is it gives us some form. If you feel the top of your finger, the bone is closer to the skin, okay? And so I'm going to assert that that's going to be the straight. Okay, we'll see if it works out. And underneath, on the tip of your finger, you got a little bit more fat, a little bit more muscle, a bit more padding, so that's a rounder shape, okay? It's got a little bit more, so if we were to draw the bone in here, it would actually be real close to the surface on this side, short distance here, longer distance here, okay? So what I have then is this overall, the same sort of straight curve, okay? And that's going to keep the dynamics of my muscle and my movement going. I'm going to show one more example here, and I'm staying on the same layer because that's what you guys are going to be doing on the paper anyway. Okay, let's see if I can get at a good angle here. Okay, the arm, right? So we got the shoulder here, the bicep here, tricep over here, but then when we get the overall shape of the forearm, it's going to be similar to this leg here, right? Where I've got a longer curve on the outside and a shorter curve on the inside. Could even say this is even straight. We could go straight with that just because of the angle it's at. Okay, and on the bicep too, keep in mind that not the bicep stretches, it relaxes and it flexes. Okay, so if you've got an extended arm, you shouldn't have a balled up bicep like that. Okay, it should be nice and long because it's relaxed, right? The tricep is the one that's in tension when your arm straightens out. Okay, so we've got long curve, shorter curves on this side. Okay, so we've got this same concept going through all of the different body parts that we can think of, right? So look for opportunities where you can balance out straights and curves for creating a rhythmic appeal to your contour lines, okay? And that's the basis of it. Some general tips: if you're using charcoal, like I said, sometimes it's nice to knock in your gesture really lightly with the side of the charcoal. It'll write a little bit, or it'll make a lighter mark. Same thing with graphite. I find graphite a little bit less squirrely. It's a little easier to control. Um, Graphite it doesn't smear as easily. Charcoal absolutely does, but we can use that to our advantage when we get into value studies. The softer the charcoal, actually, the better. If you're having if it looks like you're laying down ink with your charcoal pencil, chances are it's too hard. Okay, it's too hard of a charcoal, and it's just making a really black line. You don't get that range of value. So go for the softer charcoal if you have it available to you. You can go out and buy some. Vine charcoal is my favorite, and I also really like China markers. China markers are clean, well, relatively, and they peel off. They don't. They're kind of like they're wrapped in really tight paper. They're sometimes called a grease pencil, but you pull a little string, and then you can unpeel this this pencil underneath, and it's a kind of a greasy, waxy surface. I really enjoy it on newsprint. It works really well. So keep these things in mind. Another thing, even on the scale of the neck, we've got a long straight here, and then we've got a curve here for the Adam's apple, and the jugular veins that come down, and the tendons that hold the head up. And even on the head, we got a curve here, and then relatively straight there. Okay, so there's lots of opportunity to look for this stuff, and it's really fascinating. We're going to get away from the actual straight, but it's a good way to start roughing stuff in. All right, so that is a brief lesson on contours and keeping everything rhythmically balanced between straights and curves.